Welcome back to Lifestyle of the Broken Creative Podcast. I'm your host, Eric, and today, June 15th, 2022, is the show's 2-year anniversary. I would like to thank all my listeners for coming along on this ride with me so far. If this is your first time tuning in, we love you for choosing Lifestyle of the Broken Creative. And feel free to take a look back into the minds of so many talented creatives from our previous episodes. Our guest for today's segment, titled What Pride Means to Me, 2-year anniversary, is guaranteed to become quite a force in the world of media and business news broadcasting. Our guest has started the company Queerency, amplifying queer voices and providing a space for truth, dignity, and celebration of queer excellence. Queerency is about to paint the business world rainbow, and we are here for it, honey. Please welcome to the show the brains and the bronze behind Queerency, founder and CEO, Travers Johnson. Hi, Travers. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
This means so much. I've been following Queerency for some time now, and I think what you're doing is amazing. And This is not only our Pride special, but you can call it our 2-year anniversary special. So thank you so much for joining.
Well, congratulations on 2 years. That's amazing. And I'm so honored to be on your anniversary special. I feel really special to be a part of it. So thank you. And your anniversary is one day before mine. So my 2-year anniversary is June 16th, 2020.
For Queerency?
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, you know what? I didn't even know that. Wow, that's amazing. That is amazing. Yes. So we both get to celebrate together.
It is. Yeah, it's really exciting. And I'm not sure if you are aware of this, but so I started Queerency on June 16th, 2020, because the day before, June 15th, 2020, was the day that the landmark U.S. Supreme Court LGBTQ employment discrimination case was ruled that made it illegal to discriminate against queer people in the workplace. And so that was on June 15th, 2020. And the next day I started Queerency. So you started this on a really momentous day.
Is that what sparked it for you? Is that what sparked Queerency?
Yes and no. So that was the spark to finally get started. But the story of Queerency began about I think literally a year prior to that is when I bought the domain. And my background is in publishing and digital media. And for the past about 4-5 years, I've been doing a lot of work at the intersection of business media and minority communities. And so I've written a lot about Black-owned businesses and women-owned businesses. But in the midst of that, I always realized that I never saw myself represented as a queer person consistently and with depth in business media. So as a Black person, I had really great legacy and new outlets like Black Enterprise and newer ones like The Plug or Afrotech to go to. As a cisgender man, I could see myself represented in literally any mainstream business publication. But as a queer person, and especially a queer person, prior to 2020 or so, you really did not see us represented consistently in business media or personal finance publications outside of Pride Month,
Yeah,
and normally then it was just like a a quick roundup of,
rainbow flags.
yeah. And so, one thing that really, I may be getting ahead of myself with this, so apologize.
No, it's okay. Keep
Okay.
flowing.
Yeah. So when I came out, like, I was sort of explicitly and implicitly told that, like, I was ruining my career prospects, right? Like,
Okay.
I was the sort of quintessential, like, closeted, queer, overachieving kid growing up. So, like, all of the awards, all of the trophies, all of the contests and the, that sort of stuff. And that continued in many ways throughout college as well. And so, I had some pretty cool like internships and job opportunities in my early 20s. And, people that cared about me were concerned that, like, being out would, like, sort of limit those opportunities.
Tarnish all that you built.
Yeah. And, as a, it's hard enough in the workplace as a Black person, but then to also be a Black and queer person, the fear was that would be like a double-edged sword. And in some ways that's true, and in many ways I believed that, but that's because I didn't see myself represented anywhere, right? So I couldn't even conceptualize that you could be an out queer person and thrive in your career and live a life of purpose and contribute to your success, to your society through your work. And over the years, I would always be surprised, and of course be, like, very pleasantly surprised, but surprised nonetheless, when I would learn that, like, oh, the new CEO at that time, Tim Cook, is a gay man, or that Facebook had a gay co-founder, or that the founder of Sirius XM Radio is a trans woman. And then later to find out about names like Arlen Hamilton, who is a Black queer woman who's one of the hottest venture capitalists in Silicon Valley today. And, I always thought that, like, wow, like, if someone like me who works in publishing, works in media, like, sort of is really, like, Fast Company magazine was my favorite magazine, and I would read it cover to cover. If I don't know these things and I'm a queer person, what does that mean for people who aren't as obsessed with this? And
people
what
like
does that,
me.
Yes,
Exactly. Honestly, Queerency has brought so much information to me that literally blew my mind, and I couldn't believe that more people haven't spoke up about this, because it's things that we literally talk about on a daily basis. So a lot of these companies are incorporated in our everyday lives, and I had no idea that they were, run by people like us. So Queerency I think you are really doing the people's work. Like, you really are out there putting this information for, like I said, people like myself who don't really go out there and look at Fast Business magazine. Like, so that it's commendable, really unbelievable too.
Well, I'm glad, I appreciate that. And I'm glad that it resonates, because, like, the ultimate mission of Queerency is to provide possibility models, right? So, like, it's not to say that everyone's, this is not some, like, bro-tastic capitalistic fever dream, right? Like, we're not saying that everyone needs to become a billionaire or needs to, like, do all these things. But the goal is to, like, show that there are people like us at everywhere, right? At the peaks of industries, and to have those possibility models so that we can, see what it's possible to be and achieve at work and in life in general.
Yeah, it's very inspirational. It's needed because mainstream media doesn't do that for us. They want to shine the light on all the negativity surrounding our community.
Sure.
And you're doing a great job. So now let's talk a little bit about pride, because this episode, when I first created this podcast, it was like a love letter to the LGBTQ plus community about what pride meant to me. So what does pride mean to you? What do you think of when you hear pride?
So the first thing that comes to mind is possibility. And what that means for me is that, I think for so much of our history, since like the 1960s or prior to that, being queer, and especially being an out queer person, completely limited all of your opportunities, right? And it's sort of, to your point earlier, the mainstream or the enemies of our community have a very specific narrative about what it means to be queer, and without the work and the intentionality of people in our community to say, no, we are not who you say we are who we are, and this is what being a queer person can look like. This is how it can, this is how we can be, who we can be, what we can be. That's what I think pride means, right? To be, whether that literally means going to a pride parade and just sort of looking around and seeing, the different shapes and sizes and colors and backgrounds and abilities of the queer community, to see the possibilities of that. But also it could be just a much more private, intimate, internal understanding of what queerness can be. So possibility is one of the things that the first words that come to mind. And then secondly, which is adjacent to that for me, is community. I think that I'll never forget my first Pride
parade. Please tell us.
So I had just moved to New York City right out of college. And it was the first time I'd ever been to any sort of Pride event whatsoever. And I will never forget, I was 21 at the time. And I was probably, I think don't quote me on this, but I think I forget the avenue or the street that the Pride Parade typically goes down.
If you're in the Village, it would be down Christopher. Everyone generally congregates down there and then walks to the piers.
That sounds
You're probably talking about Christopher.
Yeah. So I was probably on Christopher Street, and I just remember looking at these younger than me people, right? So I would assume that they were probably teens, 15, 16-year-old kids. And they were marching in the parade, and they were just chanting and singing and dancing and just so comfortable. they seemed to be so comfortable in
Yeah.
themselves and without any shame or any of that, any of the shame that, society forces upon and queer people and tells us that we're supposed to have. Yeah. And so I just remember looking at them, and they were singing. There was a song by Drake at the time. I forget the name, like the actual name of the song, but it's like, "You the effing best, you the effing best."
Yeah.
That song. And they were just like screaming that at the top of their lungs. And I was just so taken by that scene, not by the song, not by anything, but just like the entirety of it. Just like watching, I remember thinking, like, these kids are younger than me and they have more courage than I do, right? So like, it gave me permission to like finally be comfortable in my queerness. And yeah, that was just an amazing moment.
It really is. Pride is so liberating. And even just going into the village, I remember going there when I was like 15, 16 years old. And I mean, it's a little sketchy when you're that young. It's a little scary, but I felt so comfortable because there were so many others that were just like me, or, had like minds and maybe were so different from me, but I could feel comfortable enough to be myself. It really is such a liberating experience, and I hope that everyone does get to experience, that full pride potential.
Yeah. And like New York Pride especially, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think there's something, and I'm so grateful that my first Pride was New York Pride, because I think there's just something so special about that one and the history of Stonewall and, Christopher Street and the Village and all of that. Yeah, that was a really meaningful experience.
It really, you feel it in your body. It's one of the best experiences. I love Pride Month. I love that now it is a month and that other cities are doing it, smaller cities. So it's great. Do you have any Pride plans this year?
So I'm going to dinner with some new friends that I have. And so that's basically the extent of it. I live in Austin, and so Austin Pride is not in June. So there aren't any like parades or festivities during the month of June. So you have to be more like intentional about like creating your own space, which again, like goes back to that community, right? Like creating, pride is community. And, it also makes me think about people, in Austin, this is like the most progressive city in Texas, right? And we're having to be intentional during the month of June because because Austin Pride is not in June. But it makes me think about the people who don't have the privilege or good fortune of living in a place like Austin or New York, right?
Yeah.
The people that live in rural Texas or rural America, Midwest, Southern states, small town America, they have to be even more intentional if they're even able to, about cultivating that community. And so I really admire people like that who are able to build community and celebrate pride in places where it's not as simple and safe to do so.
And in a way, I want to say that's the best part about being queer, being able to build your own community, build your own family, but sometimes it's not even that easy for a lot of people as well. But we have to find a way. And as long as we're speaking up and we're having conversations like this, someone somewhere in a small little town can hear this story and be inspired. And you know.
Absolutely. No, yeah, absolutely.
I think that's what Queerency is all about. That's why I had to have you here. That's why. So I want to know, what are some interesting facts, like like blew your mind facts that you found while doing research for Queerency Stories?
So I mentioned this earlier, but this is always going to be the first one that comes to mind, is that the founder and creator of SiriusXM is a trans woman, right?
Yeah.
Like, I remember when I first heard that, and I had to reread it a couple of times to make sure that I was not incorrect, right? That I wasn't just like, that this wasn't wishful thinking, you know?
Yeah.
And not because a trans person can't be the
not
founder.
that it's not possible, but
yeah, but it's like
with these spam pop-up thing, you never know.
Exactly.
But also I understand what you mean.
Yeah, because it was more so about the fact that, like, wait a minute, this can't be correct, because how did I not know this, right? Yeah. Like, how is it possible that one of the most like mainstream media platforms in America could have been founded by a trans woman, and I had no idea, right? And so her name is Martine Rothblatt, by the way, right? And not only did she found SiriusXM, but she also founded this company called United Therapeutics, which does like so much. I don't want to like, it's such like a sort of it's a biomedical company, and so like I believe they like they create artificial organs for people who need them, as opposed to like having to wait for like an organ donation. They create artificial organs for people, right?
I think you're right. I just looked it up, and
okay,
sounds very medically advanced.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it's like, how, like,
and
you
then
know, how
the
do you
differences too. The differences too. SiriusXM and then United Therapeutics. One does nothing with the other. So.
Right, 100%. Her story is so fascinating, and it's like, you know, everyone wants to like talk about like the Elon Musks and the Jeff Bezoses and the Mark Zuckerbergs of the world, but it's like, we have Martine Rothblatt right here, right? Like in our face, right? So that was the first one. The second one that really blew my mind was the story of Norris B. Herndon, who it was a Black gay man who was once the richest Black person in America, and he helped fund the civil rights movement. So he was the son of Alonzo F. Herndon, who was one of the wealthiest Black people in America at the turn of the 20th century. And Alonzo F. Herndon was like the founder of the Niagara movement, which was the predecessor to the NAACP. He was really good friends with like scholar and activist W.E.B. Du Bois, and he was the founder of Atlanta Life Insurance Company, which was a huge Black-owned business in like the early 1900s. When he died, his son, Norris B. Herndon, took over the company. And at the time, the company was worth $1 million, which was a huge amount of money back then. But by the time that Norris died in his 70s, he had grown the company to be valued at $100 million.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so he was like this notorious recluse, right? Like people, everyone, like Ebony magazine, Jet magazine, they would write these articles about him, and they, you know, the headline would be like, "Who is Norris B. Herndon, the richest black man in the world?" Right? Like, or in America, like, no, like he's a recluse, he's a hermit, right? And like the reason he was that way was because he was a closeted gay man, right? And this has been substantiated in academic publications, in more commercial books, in articles, but also by family and close friends. And that was so inspiring to me, because it's like, here's this like huge figure, and he like helped fund, you know, a lot, like direct, like literally wrote checks to Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. He wrote checks to the Southern Christian Leadership Organization. He helped secure the funds for historically black colleges such as Morris Brown College in Atlanta. And I'd never heard of his name before, right? No. And even if I had heard of Atlanta Life Insurance and the Herndon name, I definitely didn't know that he was like me, right? Yeah. And so that has been such an inspiring story for me as well, because like, you know, it really showed just like the amazing contributions that we've always been making to our communities and society at large. And it just like put just a little more fire into me to like help make sure that like the stories of people like Martine Rothblatt and Norris Herndon are not forgotten, or in the case of Martine Rothblatt, who is alive and well and thriving, that like, you know, like she is not,
these stories are heard, period.
That she's just not overlooked, right? Like not forget about being forgotten, just to make sure that she's not overlooked while she's here.
That's pretty impressive though. And then the sad part about it all, I think, is that he had to be so recluse and had to be a hermit because of his sexuality. I think, you know, that I think is the part that really struck me, the whole thing. It's because I'm like, you're funding all these movements. You would think people would want you in the forefront, you know, with them. But that's our world. You can't just be one thing. You have to be all of it. So
no, and it's just like a sobering reality check, right? That like, you know, and really I try not to take for granted that I am living in the times in which I'm living, right? And that I came of age in the time in which I did. Because had I come of age 20 years prior, who knows what my life would look like? And, you know, not to mention, you know, before that. So, you know, it's because of the work of people done before many of us were even born, that we can even like be having the conversation that we're having now in a public way, you know?
Exactly. Having companies like Queerency sharing their stories for the public to hear. I love it. I love everything about it. So I want to know though, in about 5 to 10 years, where do you see Queerency? What do you plan for the future?
So, you know, that changes a lot sometimes, right? Because I'm sure that you know can relate to this, but like when you're building a business, when you're doing any sort of endeavor and building anything from scratch, like you think you have an idea of what it's going to look like, but it's only in practice and not theory that you start to see it come together, right? So it's actually really hard to like say what Queerency would look like so far ahead, because honestly, you don't know even know what the world is going to look like, that far. But what I will say is that I want Queerency to be a platform, and this has not changed from my initial ideations of Queerency to until today, is that I want Queerency to be a platform that amplifies smart queer content, smart queer voices, interesting, inspiring queer information, and also helps us to be informed and tells the stories of those of us that are often not included in the narratives or the conversations, right?
Yeah.
So, I started Queerency because not only was mainstream business media not talking about LGBTQ entrepreneurship and business, but nor was like mainstream queer media doing it consistently, right? And that's not a knock on the like general interest queer publications, because like that was not their niche, right? Like your niche is culture and pop culture, entertainment, that sort of stuff, then like that's awesome, and they're doing amazing things in those arenas. So that just means that like there's room for a Queerency to come and help amplify the stories that they aren't telling, and that's fine. And so I think regardless of what Queerency looks like in 5 to 10 years, the goal and mission is always going to be to provide possibility models for who we can be, what we can achieve, and to do so with dignity, depth, and love.
I love that. And honestly, I think that's sort of where my podcast it aims to be as well. I wanted to provide a space for creative voices that maybe aren't really getting heard, that should be heard, or that not everyone gets to see and really hear about. So yeah, I love it. I think that's what really drove me towards Queerency. I was like, this is something I'm all about. I want to know who's doing what, and you're doing that. So
I'm glad to hear that. Thank you for saying that, because like, I think that you may resonate with this as well, is that like you can have an idea and you can like think that you know what people want, but you never know until like you actually put it out there, right? Yeah. And so I don't take for granted when people say that they appreciate what I'm doing with Queerency and the work of Queerency, because I feel very fortunate that I found something that other people can nerd out on as much as I do, right? Like, and I would still be interested in this content and the work that I'm doing without an audience, but like knowing that like other people care about this as much, like makes it that much easier, like it pushes me. And one thing I do want to add I want to circle back to really quickly about like the whole, like, what is Queerency going to look like? What's the plan 5-10 years from now? Is that part of the reason that it's hard to say is because like platforms can change so much, right?
Yeah.
So when I first started Queerency, the idea was going to be just a website and a newsletter, right? Okay. For like the first year and a half, I was vehemently against any sort of video, or at least me being on camera, right? Like, okay. I was not interested in doing Instagram videos, and was like even less interested in TikTok, right? Like, just had no interest whatsoever. Was trying to figure out any and every way to avoid that. But then I realized that my Instagram growth was stalling because the Instagram algorithm was only rewarding and promoting video content, right? Yeah. And so I knew that like if I didn't start doing some sort of video content on Instagram, Queerency could like die, right? Yeah. And so when I started doing Instagram, I was like, well, I might as well try TikTok. And begrudgingly sucking my teeth and rolling my eyes, I created the TikTok account. Now I created it in November, but I didn't, created the account in November, but I didn't really start doing it for real until February of 2022. So created the account in November 2021, but didn't really start really doing videos until February 2022. And when I saw how quickly it started to gain traction there, like it just blew my mind that it could like resonate so deeply on that platform in a way that it wasn't elsewhere, right? And so that's why I say it's hard to say what Queerency will look like. Because if you had asked me the same question this time last year, I wouldn't have ever predicted that I would have gotten almost 20,000 followers in 3 months on TikTok, right? Yeah. So, yeah.
I hear you there, because when I first came out with my first book, I was like, I use a pen name, which is dedicated to both my grandparents, my grandfathers, Ronald Rod. It's also my middle name, but I was like, no, I'm just gonna be completely anonymous. I use my pen name. I set up a separate Instagram and all this stuff just to put pictures of the book, pictures that my nieces and nephews would send with the books and stuff like that. And then I was like, you know what? I think I need to put myself out there more, because this isn't catching. And I'm like, and it's good. I know my books are good. And once I started doing that, it did change things around. Things turned around. So people want to know, like I said, just like with Queerency, I wanted to know these stories. People want to know our stories as well.
Yes, you're right.
It's awkward. It's a little weird, but you got to put yourself out there.
Yeah. And it gets easier, but like I'm a natural introvert who has like extroverted tendencies or extroverted abilities, right? So like I can be extroverted when needed, but like the way that I recharge is like by myself, right? Yeah. I recharge internally. I don't really recharge from the energy of other people. And so it's always, I think there's always going to be like a level of ambivalence for me when it comes to like being on camera and stuff. But to your point, that which I think is so important, people trust other people, not institutions, right? Yeah. So that's something that I also had to quickly pivot with in regards to Queerency, because like when I first was conceptualizing And launching Queerency, the idea was that it was going to be Fast Company magazine for queer folks, right?
Yeah.
But like, people are now responding more to like, this being a creator first platform, than it being like this sort of faceless institution, that like is speaking sort of down as opposed to speaking with an audience, right? So yeah.
They want to see you create rather than it just something you're throwing at them. So
Yes.
but I think you're doing a wonderful job at it. I honestly, TikTok is what brought me to Queerency.
And
I think
likewise,
in February. So it worked. And then we're gonna do a little something here, because normally I end the episodes asking everyone, what nonprofits they would like to talk about, if they're involved in any charities. But I thought we would do a little bit something different, because I know Queerency has, for Pride, a new Queerency Corporate Pride Month tracker, which I thought was so amazing. I was like, I cannot wait to see it from like a year from now, and everyone should be using this. It's unbelievable. So I just wanted to get a few things from you. So first, let's start with the top 2 queer companies you think people should support during Pride and after Pride.
That's such a difficult question that forgive me if I sort of like don't answer this directly, right? Because part of the joy of this job is like, literally every day I find out about a new queer-owned business, right? Or find out that a business that I already like or was aware of is queer-owned, right? So it's going to be really hard for me to choose 2. However, I will say that like some that like really have impressed me, and they're like sort of, these are like in the grand scheme of like company size, these are still considered small businesses, but they are popular and get a lot of press. So one is Telfar. I'm not sure if you've ever heard of it, but Telfar is an affordable luxury handbag and accessories company. And their sort of like tagline is like, they create the Bushwick Birkin bag.
Okay.
So like, basically what it is, it's like these really modern, minimalist handbags and other accessories that
I feel like I've seen them before, and just because you said the Bushwick Birkin, that's when it like clicked. But I couldn't have told you the company name. But Telfar,
and like I just really love so much about what they're doing. I love that they're making luxury affordable, making it luxury for the everyday person. I also just love their marketing. I think they have done such a brilliant job of like really understanding who their audience is and like creating content that serves their audience and builds community around their brand. So I really love Telfar. Another one that I think is really good is this company called CANN, CANN.
Okay.
And so they create non-alcoholic spirits. And I think their first product, I may be wrong, but like I believe their first product was like cannabis infused cocktails. And then they have since like expanded their product line to like include non-cannabis infused, but still non-alcoholic beverages as well. And I just really love that they also really found like a hole in the market to fill, but that their marketing is just so good. Like it's really like their ad campaigns are just very well done, and I think that they really speak to their audience and build sort of community around their brand in a very good way.
I definitely have to check that one out. I use this company, Three Spirits.
Okay.
They're like the same thing, but I don't think they're queer owned, but they're based out of Miami, so you never know. But,
okay, cool. That's what's up.
Yeah,
and then
so
I would just a very quick plug. However, Queerency is going to be releasing the second annual Big Book of Queer Business later this month, and so that will have literally hundreds of queer-owned brands in multiple different categories to support and to shop. So like I would recommend everyone to check that out as well.
Yes, that's great.
Yeah, and it's gonna be we call it the Big Book of Queer Business because the first issue was like a PDF digital download. So it's gonna live. It's a digital publication, so it'll live on our website just so that people can access it for free and check it out. There will be all sorts of like businesses from beauty to apparel to art and books, and everything from small like one-person creator businesses to larger ones, and everything in between. So
that's great. I'll send you some suggestions too.
Okay.
Some business owners I know. So next, let's see. And I have a few suggestions myself, but I want to know yours. Top two queer movie suggestions.
So I am not much of a film person as much as I am a book person. So my film recommendations are probably not. Actually, I'm going to defer to you. I'd love to hear your recommendations because, So what are you
now? The one that I recently watched that was I thought so spot on was Fire Island, because I've been to Fire Island a number of times. I can't even tell you how many times, and it legit was so well done and so beautifully done. It was a little emotional, but also very funny, and it gave you the feeling of Fire Island. It's really a great movie.
That's what's up. Yeah, everyone that I've heard talk about it has said the same thing. So I can't wait to watch that. Yeah.
It really is so worth watching. And then, so I want to hear your top two book suggestions then.
Okay, cool. So I'm reading this book now, which came out.
Yes.
What they call All Boys Aren't Blue.
Yes.
And I'm actually going to be leading a book discussion on this later this month with this book club called Banned Book Club. And it is exactly what it is. It's a book club of books that have been banned or have tried to be banned by these fascist conservative people across the country. This is All Boys Aren't Blue is written by George M. Johnson, who is just an amazing writer and creative. And you know, the back cover of the back of the hardcover jacket says "Be bold and brave and queer," and I think that's a great way to sort of like describe the mission of the book.
Yes.
But it's, you know, it's part memoir, part manifesto. And then another book that that's sort of like fundamental. I'm going to give you more than two because I want to, I'm a book nerd, and my background is actually in book publishing. So like I'm a book editor by trade. So
Yeah.
you and I will have to talk about like your book stuff, like, cause I'm excited to hear more about that. So sort of like a book that I think that it's very targeted towards gay men. So I'm going to preface it by saying that, but it really, and it can be it was written probably over like maybe almost 20 years ago, 15 years ago. So keep that in mind as well. But it's this book called The Velvet Rage. And it's about sort of what it's like to be a gay man in a society that wants you to be anything but. And it's a nonfiction book, and it just really, you know, I think, you know, it's written by a white gay man, and yet there are themes in it that I think gay men of any background can resonate with, and perhaps even queer people at large can understand. And so it's sort of like speaks to I think the internal. So James Baldwin has this quote that goes, "To be a Negro in this country and to be relatively conscious is to be in a rage almost all the time." And while that quote was about being a Black American, I think of that quote when I think of this book about the Velvet Rage, because the book sort of articulates a similar feeling that a lot of queer people may have that they may not be able to express, which is like a righteous indignation about the injustices of the world around them. The third book that I would recommend is What Becomes of the Brokenhearted, which is a memoir by E. Lynn Harris, who was a groundbreaking Black gay novelist. And it basically tells his story of, you know, growing up as a queer Black boy in Alabama, and then becoming a writer and a successful one at that. And, you know, as a book person, as a creative, it really spoke to me. And I'm also very biased because I got to work with Elin Harris for a very small amount of time before he died early in my career. So that's really special. So there's an Instagram account that I follow called Favorite Librarian, @FavoriteLibrarian. And the person who runs it posts a lot about Black, queer literature and literature by queer people of color in general.
I'm looking up favorite librarian now as we.
Okay, so here's one. So this is a classic, but it's a classic for a reason. And it's by the beloved and dearly departed Bell Hooks.
Yes.
And it's called All About Love, New Visions. And, you know, I'm certain that many people that are listening to this podcast have heard of and maybe even read this book. But I think that there are certain books that you should reread regularly, and this is one of them.
Especially after certain amounts of time, because it picks up different meanings, and that's definitely a good one.
Yeah. So I'll leave it there. I mean, I think that one thing that I'm very grateful for, and I think it's such a good thing, is that there are so many queer stories that are being told today, right?
Yeah.
Like, and I think, you know, book bans aside, I think that, you know, people who are either coming of age or people like me, who's like fully grown, but has not really, who are like people who are my age, they're like fully grown, but like have not really done the reading in queerness, have so much to at their fingertips today than in the past. So there's so many great options out there.
Fully agree. And especially I think now that you can access things online, because a lot of people feel ashamed going public places to get these books and things like that. So there are plenty of options. And like you said, at Favorite Librarian has all these great suggestions on their page. So definitely check that out.
And then I will, if I can plug some queer-owned bookstores that are awesome. A couple that I will like shout out are Under the Umbrella Bookstore, which is in Salt Lake City, Utah. Another bookstore that I want to shout out is Betty's Pages. They're a queer-owned indie bookstore in Lowell, Michigan. Nice. And of course, online as well.
Yes. If you're not there, check them out online. And then let's see. Because we're in Pride Month, what do you think would be the top 5 cities to celebrate Pride in?
I think that answer depends on who, like what your intersections are in queerness. So I think that certain cities and certain prides are going to be more appealing depending on who you are. That said, my personal favorite prides that I've experienced are number 1, New York City. It's just hard to beat that one. I was having this conversation with my best friend like 2 days ago, or it might have been yesterday, but not that long ago, about just like, you know, I've been to other prides, but like, and had a wonderful time, but none have topped New York City Pride. I think that DC Pride, so DC has like 2 prides. It has DC Black Pride, which is Memorial Day weekend every year during May, and then what's called Capital Pride, which is like the more mainstream pride in June, which was this past weekend. Both of them are really great. I have enjoyed both of them, and I think they're just both really great events. So DC would be the next city. The other thing that I might sort of like say is that there are other gatherings other than like pride that you can like take pride in, right?
Yeah.
So like there's market days in Chicago, which I've never been to, but like, you know, clearly people really enjoy that. And then there's you know, just other, like, depending on whatever your intersections or interests are, there's so many like destinations.
I've been to Black Gay Pride in Atlanta, and that was pretty wild. It was a lot of fun.
That's
that
a good
was
one.
definitely memorable.
Yeah,
but I've never been to DC Prides before. I've been to Miami.
Check those out. Yeah, how was Miami?
Miami was fun, very hot and wild, but yeah, that was a lot of fun too. But definitely New York, nothing tops New York.
Yeah, I think like
because then also you can get a mix of whatever you want. If you want to get parade, if you want to get parties, if you want to get just nice dinners, nice events, daytime events, outdoor events, you have a little bit of everything.
Yeah. New York Pride, I think, has everything that you need at once and in one city.
So last one, but I want to know 5 LGBTQ nonprofits that people should look into or should know about.
Of course, there are like the well-known ones that are awesome and do really good work, like the Trevor Project and It Gets Better. But there are some others that I think that are, you know, deserve your attention as well. So there's the Transgender Law Center. They are a trans-led legal advocacy group, and they work on keeping trans and gender non-conforming people alive, thriving, and fighting for liberation. So that's one that I recommend. Another one, because I am in the South, I'm born and raised Texan, and I live in Austin. This is not specific to Texas at all, but it is specific to the South, and it's called the Campaign for Southern Equality. They advocate for legal and lived equality for LGBTQ people in the South, and engage in rapid response organizing in response to like immediate political threats. And I think that they're so important,
especially right now.
Yes. Because they do a lot of local, on the ground, rapid response work. Another one that people should support and know about if they don't already is GLSEN, GLSEN. And they support LGBTQ students and work to end bullying in grades K through 12. So that's another organization that's like really, it's like always timely, but especially timely today. And then another one that I think that people should know about is an organization called the Bisexual Resource Center. So, you know, people talk a lot about bi erasure when it comes to pride and just like queer community in general. And so the Bisexual Resource Center is one of the few groups that works exclusively on bisexual and pansexual rights. And they've been fighting biphobia since 1985. And the last one that I'll mention, although there are so many more that I can mention, is the Black AIDS Institute. So they are an organization that's dedicated to ending the HIV/AIDS epidemic in the Black community. And they were founded, while they're not focused solely on queer people or Black queer people, they were founded by a Black queer person.
Okay.
And I think that do such amazing work, and that's another organization that deserves your attention.
Definitely. And yes, I definitely agree. There are so many out there. These are just a few that people may not have heard of. But are these all on that tracker, or are they going to be part of the big book as well? Or
Yeah. So I'll be including these and lots of others in the big book. And actually, none of these have shown up in the tracker, which is why I chose those to mention on this podcast. And the reason is that doing the tracker, the corporate pride tracker is such a cool and very interesting thing to like nerd out on the data, because one of the things that I'm learning through the tracking is like which organizations get a lot of the donations, right? And so, some of those organizations like the Trevor Project or It Gets Better or the Human Rights Campaign, a lot of corporations spend or give a lot of money to those organizations, as they should, particularly like the Trevor Project, and ones that are really on the front lines of like helping support queer youth. So I think that they get a lot of attention and financial resources. So in the big book of queer business, I want to also highlight some more grassroots ones, or ones that people might not know about that could really use the support, and for which like every dollar makes a huge difference.
Yeah. Everyone, look out for the book. We need the big book so we know where to go. But thank you so much, Travers. Those were all great suggestions. And I think we're pretty much done here. So just let everyone know the best way to support Queerency.
Thank you. Well, Eric, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to speak with you today. This has really been enjoyable. And I can't wait to like see what else you have cooking and look for ways to support your work moving forward.
Thank you.
I really, like I mentioned before, like I really, really enjoy the work that you do and how you do it. And I hope that we can work together in the future.
Certainly.
But as for Queerency, you can follow Queerency on TikTok and Instagram primarily, and the username is @Queerency, QUEERENCY, like currency but queer. And we're also on Twitter and Facebook under that username. But to be honest, like we don't use either one of those platforms that much. So if you really want to follow us on TikTok and Instagram. And then also subscribe to our newsletter at queerency.com. There you'll be able to just, when you go to that, you'll come to our website and you'll see the subscribe link, and you'll get our weekly newsletter. And then also on the website, queerency.com, you'll be able to read all of our interviews, features, and news articles, and more resources for you to support queer-owned brands and queer creators.
Yes, I'll be sure to include all your social media in the description of the video and all the information about queerency.com. Thank you so much, Travers. This has been unbelievable. I couldn't have spent my second year anniversary with a better guest.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. It really does mean a lot. Happy Pride to you.
Happy Pride to you.
We'll definitely be in touch.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
You heard it here, people. Queerency for all your LGBTQ plus business news. Travers Johnson, thank you again for celebrating this 2-year milestone with me during my favorite month of the year, Pride Month. Be sure to check out the suggestions Travers made during this episode, this month and all year long to show your pride. You can find Queerency on social media by searching @Queerency on IG, TikTok, Facebook, and Twitter. Subscribe to their newsletter today at queerency.com to stay up to date with all the latest LGBTQ plus business news you won't hear anywhere else. Happy Pride all, and remember to spread peace, love, and happiness, and always be creatively you.